Okay, y'all, let's get to cooking. This is what we're doing today. Okay, so here are the ingredients that we'll be using. For the pumpkin cinnamon roll, the dough, we'll be using 4 to 5 cups of all-purpose or bread flour, and I'm going to use bread flour for mine. 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 4½ teaspoons of instant yeast, that is 2 packets of yeast if you have them in the packets, 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 cup of whole milk, 1/4 cup of unsalted butter, 1/2 cup of canned pumpkin puree, and that is about half of that can, and then a large egg. That's for the dough, and I'll put these ingredients down in the description box as well. For the pumpkin butter filling, I'm going to use 1/4 cup of unsalted butter, 1/4 cup of canned pumpkin. I may use a little bit more depending on how big my cinnamon rolls are, the dough is. 2/3 of a cup of brown sugar packed, 1½ tablespoons of ground cinnamon, 1½ teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. That was 1½ teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. Then I will make my traditional cream cheese icing that I'll drizzle over the top. Because some of us like icing and some of us don't here at Mewaw's house. So I'll have a few with icing and a few without. So let me go ahead and measure out my ingredients and we'll get to cooking. Okay, so the first step to making our dough is to get our warmed milk ready for the yeast. I'm adding a little bit more evaporated milk to make a full cup. This milk has been warmed to about 110 degrees, so not very hot, but warm, nice and warm to the touch. To my warmed milk, I'm going to add 4 teaspoons and a half of yeast. If you have your yeast in packets, it would be 2 packets of yeast. Now, not only does yeast need a warm liquid to be able to melt into, but it needs sugar to feed off of. So I'm going to add most of the sugar of that 1/3 of a cup of sugar, and then I'll add that sugar on into the dough later on. But let's get this good stir going so the yeast and sugar can dissolve and get to work. So I'll set that aside and let it bloom. In the meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and mix our dry ingredients together. So in my bowl, I'm going to go ahead and add my 4 cups of flour. Like I said, I'm using bread flour for this particular recipe. Bread flour has a higher level of gluten and it kind of sticks together and get elastic better, and that makes for a better bread. So we're going to go ahead and add our flour. All-purpose flour works just as well. I've made it with both. Now I'm going to add my kosher salt, because without salt, your bread really is bland, and you don't want your bread bland. If you're going to use regular salt, you may have to use just a little bit more because kosher salt is a bigger granule of salt. So go ahead and mix this in well together, and then we'll get the rest of the ingredients in. Okay, let's set the dry ingredients aside and get the wet ingredients ready to go. In my bowl, I have my 1/4 cup of butter melted. I've let that cool just a little bit because I'm going to add my egg, and I'll whisk my egg well with the butter. We need to do that very well so that they can meld together well. So, after I get that all whisked in, I'm going to add it to my dry ingredients. Now the yeast is fully bloomed. You see what a difference a few minutes will make? That is a bloomed yeast. You see the little crust on the top and the bubbles and all of that. It's been working with that sugar and milk. So we'll pour that in, and we'll pour in our egg and butter mixture as well. And to all of that, I'm going to add my 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree. And remember, this is not pumpkin pie filling, it is pumpkin puree. And we'll mix this well. It will make a really nice, soft, shaggy dough. I'm going to add the rest of my sugar now and get it all mixed in. And you know I can only do it with this spoon for a little bit, but now it's time to go in with the tool that God gave me, and I'm going to use my hand. Look how pretty a dough that makes, and it smells delicious. Normally, I turn my dough out onto my floured countertop, but with this one, I'm going to let it sit for a little while and go ahead and rise. I don't have to knead it as much, so I'm going to do it right here in the bowl. I'm going to cover it with the towel and let it rise. Now we're going to let our dough rest for about an hour. It's going to rise for about an hour, and then we'll roll it out. In the meanwhile, I'll put together my pumpkin butter, the stuff that's going to lay out on the dough so that you can see how that's done. And then we'll put it all together in the end and bake it in the oven. I'm going to start my pumpkin butter filling with a 1/4 cup of softened butter and the pumpkin puree with the water extracted. I did a water extraction demonstration on another video, and I'll stick that in here right about now. So this is the way I extract the water from the pumpkin so that it will not be as wet, because we didn't want it to be too wet going down on our dough for our cinnamon rolls. I just pat it down with the paper towel, extract the water from it, and it won't be so liquidy. We don't want it with as much liquid in it. So that's how I extract the liquid out of my pumpkin puree. Okay, getting back to my pumpkin butter filling, I'm going to add my 2/3 cup of brown sugar and my different spices. And of course, you know the spices are 1½ tablespoons of cinnamon. And why would these be called cinnamon rolls if we didn't have a good amount of cinnamon in it? Anyway, 1½ teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. And we're going to get all of that mixed well together. While I mix together my spices, I wanted to thank you all for subscribing and joining our family here at Mewaw's house. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so, and we can make some good food together. Now that we have all our spices put in, let's go ahead and mix together our ingredients for our pumpkin butter. This will make a very soft paste that we can easily spread on our dough. You have to make sure that you get these ingredients mixed well together. Otherwise, you see what state it's in now, that's not going to spread easily on your dough. The more you mix it, the easier it will be to spread. So continue to mix. The butter is not going to melt. It's just going to kind of get together with the pumpkin and the sugar. So make sure that all of it gets mixed in well together and that you do a lot of mashing and stirring. Now I'm going to set this aside and let our dough finish proofing. Oh, there it is. It's done. Look how soft it is. I'm going to go ahead and turn it out onto my floured surface. Now it's time to turn it out onto the floured surface. And I'm going to knead it just a little bit and get it in the shape that I want it to be in, which is a big square, a big rectangle. Now it's at the size that I want it to be, and it's the thickness that I want it to be, because remember, we're rolling it over on itself. Now let's go ahead and add our pumpkin butter filling, and we'll spread this all the way to the edges. And you can still see some of the flecks of butter in our pumpkin butter. It's not necessary that it has to get smooth all the way out. It's okay to have that little bit of butter that's still intact in the pumpkin butter. If you want to add nuts or raisins or anything like that, this is the time that you can do it. I actually forgot to add my nuts, so I added my nuts when I put the icing on. Because, like Mama said, there's always another way to skin that cat. Now it's time to start the roll. So I'm going to roll over one layer and then I'll tightly roll the rest. Now we're at the end of our dough, so we're going to begin the pinching process. We'll pinch that dough together at the end so that the dough won't come apart and our cinnamon rolls won't flap open. We want it to be a complete circle. You see how I'm pinching those together? Even with the little bit of pumpkin pie filling or pumpkin butter filling, I can get it pinched together. We're going to flip that over to the pretty side and begin our cutting. I'm going to go ahead and spray my 13 by 9 inch baking dish with some Pam before I get started with my cutting. And of course, you've seen me do cinnamon rolls before, and I'm going to use my handy dandy cutting tool out of the bathroom, a little dental floss. And before anybody drops up into the comments section with a concern about whether I pulled this dental floss out of the bathroom or not, it is not out of the bathroom. This is my kitchen dental floss. I just said that it's a dental floss because that's what we do with dental floss. We use it in the bathroom usually. But this one is my kitchen dental floss, okay? So when we're cutting our cinnamon rolls, we want to make sure that we're getting them at the same thickness because then they bake evenly. If we can't, then we're human and we just don't always get it the same thickness. Either way, they're going to be delicious. Now let's keep cutting and placing in our baking dish. And we're placing them pretty closely together because I like for them to rise up nicely. Okay, y'all, so our pumpkin cinnamon rolls have been cut and they're in the pan. They're rising and they have to proof for about an hour. I'm going to keep my eye on it and then we'll slide it into the oven and bake them. This frosting has a half a stick of butter, a half a block of cream cheese, a pinch of salt, and 2 cups of powdered sugar. Now I'm going to mix the butter and cream cheese together just a little bit to get those mixed well. And then I'll add the powdered sugar and the vanilla. Now that I'm getting this mixed together, I'm seeing it's a little bit thick for my taste, so I'm going to add a little bit of evaporated milk and my vanilla. Okay, y'all, so I have made my icing and my buns are ready to go into the oven. I've just waited for my oven to preheat and come on, let's look at the cinnamon bun. This is the evidence of the second proof which was about a half hour. I've mixed my icing and waited a few minutes so that these can prove again or rise again. So into the oven they go. Okay, they're in the oven and we're going to bake them for 20 to 25 minutes. Now I pulled these out first because they were done, but it took about 5 extra minutes for the 13 by 9 inch pan to be completely baked, but they're all ready now. Okay, y'all, my cinnamon rolls are done. My pumpkin cinnamon rolls are done. I'm going to give it a little taste test. I left the other ones in the oven for a little bit because they were closer together and they were bigger. So I'm going to let them bake for another 3 to 5 minutes. It's not been quite 20 minutes yet. So the 25 minutes is going to work well for that 13 by 9 inch pan. In the meanwhile, let's go ahead. Ooh, baby. Look at that. Mm-hmm. That's finger licking good. I hope you give this recipe a try. It would be beautiful on your breakfast table Thanksgiving morning. So I'm going to go ahead and finish eating my cinnamon roll, have me a cup of coffee, and enjoy my morning. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Like, share, and comment on this video and any others. Y'all be blessed. Bye.